Welcome again, everyone, here at Best Homes every Tuesday at 11 a.m. We have a boot camp kind of covering the basics of real estate and some important pillars that are important to know while you launch your career in this industry. So today we have Miss Alyssa Joyner covering how to run comps. So Comp 101, she's going to dive deep into the MLS to really kind of go raw and shadowing on how to run comps. Just know she is going off the Tucson MLS, so there are some gadgets and things that might be in a different spot, but essentially it is the same thing. So if your screen does not look the same, don't worry, it's because she's in the Tucson MLS. But Miss Alyssa, if you don't mind introducing yourself and getting started on our bootcamp today.
Yes, hi, as Melissa said, I'm Alyssa here in Tucson. My screen when I share is going to be a little bit different. Things are kind of just in a little bit of different places here on our MLS. Everything, all the information's the same, just in kind of a little bit different places. And this is just kind of what I'm used to. So it's hard for me to kind of run the comps a little bit off of everything else when I know where everything is on the Tucson MLS. So that's just the one I'm going to go off of.
Entonces,
So
Lenny,
I will go ahead and share my screen and get
Está bien si
started.
usted después lo quiere transferir o vender a alguien más, está bien, se puede hacer después de eso, pero ahorita está el nombre de usted.
Sí.
Ya.
Sí, estamos haciendo eso ahorita.
¿Y qué le iba a decir? Recién vi en Sunshine Valley que se vendió una casa cerca por ahí a 500. O sea, los comparativos están altos por ahí.
Sí, es lo que le iba a decir, le mandé los comparativos.
So let me take a look here. So the one I have that I'm going to go off of today is a comp that I was looking at. Actually have a buyer looking, and I thought it was a really good one to go off of because this buyer in particular is searching in a really sought after price range in Tucson here. High 300s is kind of our really bread and butter price range down here. I know you guys up there in Phoenix, it's kind of more that 400, 450 price range that you guys are kind of dealing with, being the one that everybody's kind of chasing and hard to get buyers in on. So kind of want to take a couple different ways to look at it, especially in this market, how it's changing. So in order to run the comps, the first thing you're going to do is click on quick search. And I like to pinpoint my properties on the map just to make it a little bit easier to find and be able to search those properties around it. So come down here to the little pin and I type in my property address.
A quick question for you. Are you running comps in perspective to, I'm going to list this property, or representing a buyer?
So I
mean, they're pretty much kind of the same, but
yeah, pretty similar, but I'm going at it from the buyer's angle. I'm also going to kind of talk about it from the listing side, especially because this one did just have a huge price reduction and $20,000 price reduction, and it's still on the market. So I'm kind of going to talk about that price reduction and how important it is to make sure that you're running comps in this market and making sure you're getting them priced pretty on the mark, especially since the buyers are kind of crunching down on those numbers, and comps are over the last previous months in the market, people were throwing numbers out there. People were coming in above market. So the comps weren't as crucial as they were now when buyers were throwing offers out, coming in above your list price. But right now they're really, really honing in on that price and making sure with those interest rates climbing that they're getting, exactly what they want. They're paying what they want for it. So they're crunching those numbers. So comps now are really, really building that momentum and gaining even more importance than they already were. So I'm typing in Tucson, Arizona, and it's gonna bring up my home location. It's a little green dot because it's an active listing. I'm gonna use this location. I typically like to start with a radius search of about a mile. So that gives me a good radius of what's kind of in the area. It'll show me the other active properties that are within a mile of that, but I typically don't like to look at those to start. And then I'm going to go ahead and go to the closed listings. I like to get an idea of what's recently closed right around the property. If I can, ideally, where I like to go first is right within that subdivision. That gives me the absolute best idea of what the properties are going for right in that neighborhood, right down the street. That's where I'm going to find my most accurate comps. So I'm going to, now that I see that I have a few of them right around that area, I'm going to kind of go back. And now that I have that kind of list, I know, okay, I have a few houses to go off of. I'm going to pull up a secondary MLS page here, and I'm going to go directly to my subject property so I can compare it side by side while I'm pulling up those comp listings as well, just so I have a reference page to go off of. So this is a property that I'm going to be doing for comparison here. And I'm going to take a look at the information. So this property here is 1,844 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, built in 2014, and it's 1 story. So that's all good information that I want to try and keep in mind for the comps that I'm comparing it to. I want to try and stay as close as possible to that information and not stray too far off of that unless I absolutely have to. Like if there's nothing else that was close to those parameters, then I would venture a little ways outside of that. I also like to take a look at the other information on here, how long it's been on the market, if they've had a fall through, just for my own kind of reference. I also look here at kind of what they have in the house, flooring, carpet, ceramic tile, countertop type. One of the big things in air conditioning we always look for when we're comping a property is, at least I do anyway, is air conditioning, because I think it makes a huge difference on comps if you're comping a house that only has, let's say, a cooler versus air conditioner. That makes a difference to a ton of people, and I know it would to me as well. So I like to take a look at all of that information, and then I like to go take a look at the photos next. The photos are going to give you a kind of great idea of the property, especially if you haven't had a chance to go see that property in person yet. It's going to give you that opportunity to kind of get a feel for it if you haven't gotten the chance to walk through. So it's a low maintenance front yard. That's kind of something that I look for if that's what my buyers are looking for. Tile throughout. It's in good condition. I would say it's a move-in ready house is kind of what I would classify this one as. There's not much that needs to be done to it. So I just like to flip through fairly quickly just to kind of get an idea. Again, if there's a house that needs work done, I'm going to be going slower. I'm kind of going to pick the house apart a little bit more and be taking a deeper look at it. So here's kind of like where like they have the builder bathrooms. They haven't really done anything to upgrade the bathroom. And that's something that I'll keep in mind and take a look at when I'm looking at those comp houses. So it's a nicely done backyard as well. It's not just dirt, it's finished. There's a fire pit, grass patch. So a really nicely landscaped backyard. Okay, so now that I have a really good idea of what my, what's the word I'm looking for? Subject property looks like, I like to take a look at the history of the house. So this is where you're going to find the active listing. Of course, you're going to see the other closings that the house has had, but this is the one that I like to take a look at as well. So this is what it's currently listed for, how many days on market here. And I like to also take a look at this. So this is going to tell me what has been going on with the house. So it was first listed early June 3rd. And we did have a recent price change. Well, sort of recent, 8 days ago, and it's still on market. So that's telling me, okay, well, there's probably, I'm guessing that we're going to find out another price adjustment needed. That's kind of what we're seeing with the market here. People more and more kind of afraid of those prices. So judging by this history here, that's kind of what I'm going to be expecting that I'm going to find out from these comps. So with that information, I'm going to go back over here to my other houses that are in the subdivision that have closed recently. And I'm going to start with the one that is on the same street. So I wanted to pull this one up as an example. Just because it's close by doesn't mean that it's going to be a good comp. This one I would not use as a comp house because of the difference. It's a 2-story and it's a 3-car garage. So you want to make sure that you're staying well within like the parameters of the house, because this can really throw off your comps. If you're like, okay, yeah, it's on the same street, it's going to be a great comp house, does not mean it's going to be a good one. So make sure that before you start looking right within that neighborhood and seeing numbers, that you're not just going right off the numbers that are coming up on off any house on the same street as the one of your subject property. So I like to come over here, and again, this might look a little bit different for you guys in Phoenix, but I definitely like to put in a few parameters on my search bar on this side. So I will go off of dwelling type. That's usually the first thing I'll put in, and make sure that it matches the type of house that my subject property is, because that can kind of throw things pretty far off. As well as stories. I definitely like to say, if you can, if there's comps to do it, stay on the same number of levels. If you're doing 2 stories, stay 2 stories, same thing with 1. Our house does not have a pool, so I really don't want to see houses that have pools with them, just because I don't want to be making those price adjustments if I really, really don't have to. I'm not going to put in a current price range that I'm looking for, because I kind of want to see what the other houses are going for. I don't want to see anything, I don't think there is right here, but I don't want to see anything with less than 3 bedrooms, since that's what our subject property is listed at. So I'm going to put in 3 bedrooms, so that's what it's going to show me. And then I'm going to take a look at the ones, since it eliminated a few of them. This one still is on the same street, and it looks like the exact same mirror image of our house. Next thing I want to take a look at when I pull up a competitor property is I want to take a look at the date that it sold, because especially now with the market shifting, it's going to be a fairly big difference in what goes on in our market and the date that this one sold. So this one was listed back in February and sold, looks like it was a open door house, and it closed on April. So this was definitely more in that height of the market where things were flying off. But I do want to use this just because it looks like it's going to be the mirror image of the house. So it's going to be the exact same square footage, definitely a comparable build, built in this within the same year or within a year of the house that we're comping. And I just like to flip through the photos to make sure this one isn't like completely trashed on the inside or anything like that. So you'll see this one has some different updates, and you can tell that once you start getting into them, you never know what you're going to find on the inside of the house. So this one definitely has different stuff to account for on the inside. This one has more carpeting, but it definitely has that wood look tile. Some people do account for different stuff like that when they are comping for their buyers or sellers, because sellers can be very, very heavy in what they want you to include and what they see value as in their home. When you go to a listing appointment, you can definitely find that things weigh very heavily for sellers. They have personal value in their home. They put a large value on upgrades that they have done to their home, and they want that included in their sale price. So be very cognizant of that. If their house is fully tiled and they think it's the most wonderful thing, it's only going to have a certain amount of value when they are selling their house. It may add some value, but the buyer may come in and absolutely hate the child that's in that house, but love everything else about the house. So that for that buyer in particular adds no value. So it only would add a certain amount, the fact that that's an upgrade that they've done to the house. But this one would be a good comp for the house that we are doing, has another finished backyard. So I'm going to go ahead and check this one off. And I'm just going to kind of keep in mind that closing date, just to make sure that I make the price adjustment in my mind for the when I get down to it, for the closing date on there and where we are in the market now. So this one's kind of difficult because it's a completely different style house. And I typically don't like to cross into different style houses, even if they are located on the same street or within that same little nook. You will generally find, or I have found, that if buyers are looking for one style house, they don't like a different style house. So I personally don't like to cross into, like, from this traditional style subdivision type house to these Santa Fe style homes. I usually don't make that transition into comps. I will, if there are other comps available, look for other ones to comp against. And this one is also, in my opinion, not going to be a good one, just based on the square footage here being so far off the square footage of the subject property. I try to stay within plus or minus 200 square feet of the subject property. Those are amounts that I can account for in the comparisons, versus when you get too far out of it, you find yourself doing math for that kind of square footage and trying to compare and how much value does it really add or lose, plus or minus. So those are just things that I kind of try to avoid typically when I'm running my comps. So in that case, I go a little bit further out to try and find something that will suit me better, still within the same neighborhoods and same area, but I'm still within my mile radius marker, which is why I definitely love those markers, because it makes sure that you're staying within a certain zone and area. But I'll try and find something else that's much more suitable to the style house. So this one would fall within our 200 plus or minus square foot range. And I will take a look at it and see what the inside looks like. There's so many open door houses. So this one's almost exactly 200 square feet more, 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. Looks like this one also had a price drop. And this one closed in March. So this one I think would be a good one so far to compare. Now, unless I see something absolutely off-putting in the pictures, I think it would be a good comparison property. It looks like a pretty turnkey property, finished backyard. So I definitely think that one is a safe one to use. I like to say to find, if you can, if you're having a hard time finding them, I would say try and find 3 minimum, but if there's more, use more. It's only going to kind of help your numbers. So never a bad thing to have more numbers on your comps. You can kind of get a better average. But if you're having a hard time, I would shoot for 3 of them. So this one does fall within our 200 plus or minus. So I'm going to take a look at this one and see if it will fit. 3 bedrooms. This one has a sold date of May 6th, which is the most recent sold date. Which is interesting, and it sold above what it was listed for. I'm going to take a look at the pictures and see if it's a good comparison property. Sold for much less than the other ones, but again, the updates there. So I'm not going to use this one, basically just because this one doesn't look as turnkey as the subject property or the other 2 that we're comparing against. So I like to try and keep them, if our subject property is turnkey, I like to use other turnkey properties to compare against, just makes your life easier, not having to do those adjustments and account for upgrades and countertops and things like that that you'd have to factor in if you don't account for that in the properties that you're using. But if I couldn't find a house, if I can't find a house that is going to be another good comparison for this property, then I will go back to that one and use that one and make those adjustments to try and find out, you know, if I can adjust for the upgrades that that one is lacking and the other ones in that price difference.
I have a question.
Yes.
So let's say there were no other good comparables and you had to go back to that one that wasn't turnkey. How much worth would you put onto like having new cabinets, like, you know, quartz or granite countertops? How much value does that typically add?
Yeah, so awesome question. So I kind of go off of, I have some numbers in my mind that I kind of go off of, and everybody kind of gets different numbers from different places I've heard. So typically for me, what I do is I kind of got, I don't even remember where I got it years ago. So the numbers have, I'm sure, kind of changed, but I kind of have like a cheat sheet that I use that gives me different numbers. So typically having like, let's say a kitchen, an upgraded kitchen, you add what I have on my cheat sheet is like a $25,000 additional price bump for an upgraded kitchen. So that's what I would add to the value above that house that's non-turnkey. So everything that I would factor that in. So if the house that is turnkey does have that upgraded kitchen, it has the countertops, it has the nice counters, so it has that $25,000 price boost above the other ones that don't. So I would make sure to factor that in to my price adjustment. And that's where that one is falling in those in the mid threes, where this one is sitting listed at the fours. And I would make sure to factor those numbers in and where it's sitting on the price range. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. And then same thing for like, if you have to use, if there's no other, like if you're not finding comps within the parameters of like what you've gone and checked off on that like edit search list, say you check off has no pool and like all the houses disappear, I will go and like take that off. And kind of take off all the stuff that's limiting it and see if more stuff comes up. And then you just kind of have to make those adjustments as needed. Same thing for like a pool. Like, or now I know it's not really a big thing in Arizona and they're kind of getting phased out, but like fireplaces, if somebody's looking for a fireplace, I mean, that kind of holds value to them. If you have somebody who's like, I absolutely want a fireplace in my house, that's something you can kind of run comps on. It's valuable to your buyer, or, you know, in that case, a buyer, or if you're maybe your seller put in a full custom gas fireplace and they're like, we spent X amount of money on this, it's worth it to us, we want this factored into the value of our home. You can make those adjustments and have that conversation with them. You know, like I said, some of your sellers are going to be like, you know, we did this and this is super valuable to us, but somebody might walk through the door and be like, that's horrible, I hate it, I'm going to tear it out as soon as I move in. It only holds value to certain people. So you have to make those kind of according to your client. And then that's why I try and stick with the ones that are, you know, standard to the market. There's going to be adjustments that people are willing to pay for, but there's going to be ones that are standard to the market. Kitchens and bathrooms are very standard to the market. Typically, people want their kitchen done, a finished, nice, turnkey house. Kitchen is typically that. Bathrooms are typically that. But those custom upgrades, a lot of sellers especially like to put those values on them, and sometimes they're just not there because that's something that they did custom to the home that nobody else is really looking for. So that's where those kind of adjustments can come into play. And like I said, I have a little kind of cheat sheet, but mine is kind of old that I go off of. So I kind of factor in today's market based on like the numbers I'm seeing and hearing from appraisers and whatnot. But yeah, awesome question, because we have to make those adjustments all the time for like the properties that are done and not. Let me know if you have any other questions. Let me take a look at this house and let's see if this one is a more turnkey house. So like this one, I would say this one is definitely, let me take a look at the kitchen first before I say that. So this one, the floors and everything in the walls definitely look turnkey, but the kitchen looks like it needs to be updated, which is going to be a huge update, which people are going to see. So if I can avoid using this one as a comp property, I'm going to do so, because that's definitely a big factor. There's a lot of pictures of the sofa on this one. And the chandelier. Okay, so this one has a more updated kitchen. So the countertops are done. And some of these things are going to be hard. So there was one time where I went and looked at a property, scrutinized a property, running comps online like this. And I looked at the pictures, and the countertops looked absolutely phenomenal. They looked like they were granite countertops or quartz. I'm not big into being able to tell what the materials are like that via photo or anything else. But they looked like they were nice stone countertops. Well, we got to the property and the countertops were actually where they had poured that epoxy over it, over laminate countertops. So just be careful what you're kind of looking at, because sometimes in photos, they do such a wonderful job that you can't tell what it really is. But yeah, I just wanted to mention that because it's happened here a couple times where it looks like it's stone countertops and it's not. But yeah, so these ones I would say are updated, but there's something I should have looked at first and I didn't, and it's a square footage of this house. This one falls below the square footage that I would typically use. So I don't want to use that one. Let's see. This one also is a bit small. And that one's really small. Okay, so there is the situation where all of these homes in the range, I don't think I looked at this one, maybe I didn't. Are either too small, which I kind of want to stay away from doing like a square footage just because the price per square foot changes so drastically, I feel like, especially in this market. So I'm actually gonna take the one with that needs to do, where was it? I think it was this first one here. Kitchen update. Or that's not quite as updated as my other comps. And I'm gonna factor that in. So I'm gonna select that one for now. And also when we're doing this, I don't like to cross major cross streets. Now, it may be a little bit different in the Phoenix area, but typically neighborhoods in here in Tucson can change so rapidly across like big cross streets. So for example, I know that some of these neighborhoods are connected here through Twin Peaks, and the neighborhoods are set up that way where they have like a west and a north, this version and that version of the subdivision. But typically if there's like a cross street, like major ones, I will not cross them for my comps, just because the neighborhood can change so drastically that using that house as a comparison can really affect what you're doing. And the house may not look that different, but the neighborhood does. And where your buyers are looking or where your sellers are looking and the setup of the neighborhood. I had a friend in real estate had that done to him on a personal house where the appraiser actually crossed some pretty major blocks and his appraisal came in really, really low. So can kind of be some pretty big dings on there. So when this kind of happens, another thing I can try is I can go back to my edit search and go back to radius search and change to a 2-mile radius. Again, I don't like to because then you have to watch even more for those cross streets, but it's just something that can be done if you're not finding the comps. So we'll see kind of what comes up, but see, this is like a whole other version of house that doesn't quite fit, but I'll take a look up here. Same thing with this one. And that one. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with the ones that we have. Where did they go? Okay, so I'm going to stick with those ones. And what I'm going to do with these 3 is I'm just going to kind of go on a 1-line CMA and see what that gives me. I'm always curious what the average is. So the average days on market are 11. Median price range, high price range is 415. And the average price is 380. Low price is 330. So with our competitor price or our comparison house, our subject property being, oh, my screen share thing just dropped. Let me see if I can get back to the tab I want.
Alyssa, if you can, will you show that
Got it.
step again on how you pulled that report?
And I hit 1-line CMA.
Yeah, sorry, you froze for a second. Yes, yeah, that button.
Yep. Did you get it? Did you see it that time?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm curious, do you guys think
Could you do it one more time, please?
Yes, of course. So I go over to my list of properties and then I hit CMA and then I hit 1-line CMA and then it'll pull up this, which has the average price, low price, high price, medium, average days on market. And it'll tell you the days on market, the consecutive days on market, the bedrooms, the bathrooms, number of stories, garage, a few other additional pieces, that actually the cooling here as well, square foot of the property, what the house is sold, cash, loan type, the list price, the sold price, and the address, as well as like the single family residence and the MLS ID. So it gives you pieces of information about the house. One thing I wish it, and the closing date as well here too. So you can see like the month it closed, because I definitely like to think about that and where our market is currently. So what do you guys think as far as the price of our subject property? Having that initial price drop, it's now listed at 400. So for those subject properties, factoring in that, let's see, this house here that sold for 342 does not have that kitchen, that finished kitchen, which is why it's, you know, that $25,000 I like to account for the not having that finished kitchen in it. Do you think that our subject property is priced accordingly or over or under in the market right now?
My vote is that it's a little bit over.
I would say maybe like a 390 or something in that range.
I agree.
Awesome. And what's making you come up with that?
Because even though that 400 might meet market presently or a few weeks ago, I would think it would be more appealing. You might get more people coming through, more interest, and a more successful sale if it was priced in the direction of the market.
Awesome. I like that. Cool. Perfect. Do you guys have any specific questions that I could answer for you?
Any common issues that you guys have when it comes down to running comps? I know Natalie had a great call out in regards to like, what if that's the only one? And coincidentally,
It was.
that wasn't the only comp. So that price sheet, that cheat sheet that you had, Alyssa, did you get that just from classes, from just the common agent kind of saying this is an average? Like, where did you gather those numbers?
I can't remember where I got it. I think I went to like some workshop here down in Tucson, and it was given by like an appraiser's office. Like I said, I got it like years ago, but if you guys want it, I'm more than happy to like scan it in and you guys can have it if you want it. I mean, it's nothing fancy, but it does show like it kind of answers some questions like different square footage adjustments. Like, again, this is like years old, so the numbers are kind of off, but maybe with the market shifting, they may kind of be a little bit more normal, but you guys can kind of change them back to whatever you think is fitting. But it kind of gives you what to look for, is more so what I use it as. So like a $0 to $120,000 house, it's a $20 price per square foot, like adjustment. It kind of gives you numbers like that to look at, and price ranges of houses to look at, like price per square foot, as well as like, so it says things like portable spas, like they hold no value in a house. It's not a built-in spa. For if you have and like no carport, so if you just have like parking, like a driveway to park on versus a one-car carport, that's worth like $1,500 onto the value of a home. Just different little breakdowns, like plus or minus here and there, what a carport is worth compared to like a garage. Like I said, if you guys want it, it's nothing fancy, but it just gives you different lists of things to look at. I can scan it in and share it, but if it's okay, like I said, no problem. But yeah, just different stuff to kind of keep in mind. And this one actually states the difference in like evaporative cooler versus AC being like a $3,000 difference. If you guys ever do comp houses with like AC versus evaporative cooler, I think it's worth more than that personally, but that's just me, personal level. But yeah, so here in Arizona being, but yeah, it just gives kind of those little price differences. And like I said, I just use it as kind of stuff to look for in the properties that I'm comparing, and it gives me more of a reference point on what am I looking for in the competitor properties versus subject properties, especially if I have like a weird listing that I'm going into and there's not a lot of properties like it. It gives me something to kind of go off of and compare. Okay, well, this house has this, but it doesn't have that, but it has this and that. So that's kind of what I like to look for. But there's stuff that I disagree with. Like this sheet here says like flooring doesn't make a difference in a property. I think it makes a huge difference. I have people all the time that say like, I hate carpet, I'm not doing carpet in the house. So I think having full tile floors in a home makes a difference versus a fully carpeted home. You know, there's some stuff on there that I disagree with, but I just use it as a tool.
I had one question. Let's say you're running comps in the neighborhood. Every house in that neighborhood, let's say there are 4 and 2, but the house you're going to is a 4 and 3. How do you kind of run your comps? And there's another house similar to that that's a 4 and 3, but they're obviously they have 700 square feet more than that home. How do you kind of approach that situation then?
Oh, so you mean so 4 and 2, like, and 4 and 3 bathrooms?
Yeah, so
Like they have an additional bathroom?
because there's some homes in some neighborhoods, like all the homes that are mainland are either 3 and 2 or 4 and 2, but the one you're going to is going to be a 4 and 3, but you're like at 2,000 square feet. And there's a similar one that's a 4 and 3, but they're like closer to 2,700 square feet, for an example.
Sure. So talking about this sheet, the baseline that it gives me to go off of actually references having a half bath, an additional half bath in the house being worth $3,000 or $6,000 on top of the house value is $6,000 for a 3/4 or a full bath, and it has to be fully functional. Like it can't just be like, oh, we have it, but it doesn't work. It has to be like a fully functional, either 3/4 or full bath, and that's $6,000 added to the value is what this sheet references from like the appraiser who gave this out. And then the square footage adjustment, again, that would depend on the size of the house to begin with. And then you're kind of in that range where, like I said, we like to do plus or minus 200 square feet. If you cannot find 200 square feet plus or minus, I will jump to 300. But like I said, I try and stay within that range. But did that kind of answer your question, or was there more to it?
No, that
Okay,
answered my question.
awesome.
Alyssa, could you speak to how you might approach different school district zonings and determining the price of the home?
Yeah, so school zoning is really it's kind of difficult because that's something here. We have really weird boundaries here, and I don't know if you guys are the same. So I definitely like, that's something I like to verify. So that's something I've ran into more so with buyers. Is that what you're referencing? Like if you have a buyer looking to be in a specific school zone, or are you talking about pricing the home based on the zone of the school?
Pricing the home based on the zone of the school. For example, where we have like 9 out of 10 school on greatschool.org. And I know some, even if we go south just a little bit, I think it drops down a bit. I mean, I'm just kind of wondering, because with clients that put such a high, grade on that, and they want a great school district, I don't know. I guess just if we do see, because of school districts, that there is a significance in price and value.
That's really interesting. You know what? I haven't been asked that before, because so I don't know if it's different in there than it is for us here. We're open enrollment. So anybody now, if they drive, can go to whatever school. So are you guys the same way, or you guys have to go within your boundaries?
No, we're also open enrollment.
Okay.
But just to give some context, I had a family come in. It was just a rental family, but we looked all over Chandler and Gilbert over this last week, and they had to be in like at least an 8 out of 10 on great schools. And, most of those rentals were, of course, higher in price as well. So I'm just wondering if that would translate over into, the buying side.
I'm sure it does. Let me look into that for you and get back to you, because I don't have a specific answer on if I see that. Like, I haven't personally seen that reflected or had like a seller really like ask me that. I've had buyers want to stay within certain boundaries, but I've never seen it particularly reflect in a price. So let me look into that a little bit, and I can email you and see what I find, because that's very interesting. Let me check into that.
Yeah, just some food for thought. It might not be that significant.
Absolutely. That's really interesting. I have never been presented with that. So that's really very interesting.
All right. Thanks.
Also, you want to check the years on the Great School scores, because within the past couple years, they have been very out of whack because of all of the testing issues. So a lot of the scores that you're getting on those may be 4 or 5 years old. Which makes a huge difference.
I was going to say, yes, Lori, you would know coming from schools.
That's exactly what I told them, because I know as agents, we are not allowed to direct that. Like, oh, here's a good school district and this one is not. So I had to follow their lead. Well, tell me what you want me to search for. If you're using great schools, I'll use that too. But just know, I said some of these are biased, you know, parents can review. I know I have left negatives on certain schools. So just take it with a grain of salt that they could have absolutely great academics, but it might be, you know, bad vibes all over in the school. So yeah, but any input, that'd be great, Alyssa. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Great question. That's very intriguing, and I'm gonna look into that. I know here in Tucson, Vail is like, everybody talks about like the Vail school district, and but I've never heard, not that I've heard anyway, it having an effect on price, but I'm gonna look into that.
And I had a general question for the group or for you, Alyssa. Do you guys run comps for every house that you show, or do you really only run comps when that they're serious about the house, just in case agents are looking for patterns in their value proposition when they are representing buyers? But it's important to pull comps. Some of us just think like, oh, well, best and asking, yes, and the highest offer is going to win the game. But at the end of the day, if your client is relying on a loan, you know, there will be an appraiser that goes to the house who does an appraisal, which in turn will do similar, if not the exact same thing that Alyssa just did. And it's really just based on his opinion, and he adds and subtracts things based on kind of like what we did now. So having said that, is that something that you recommend to do with, like, if my client wants to 10 houses, do comps on all of them, or just wait until, and this is just more realtor advice in regards to your process?
Yeah, so for me, if we're going on a showing and we're going all Saturday, I'm not running comps on all those houses, because there's houses that they walk in and they're like, forget it when they step in the front door. And so I'm not going to spend, you know, my time breaking down these comps. What I'll do is I will, if we go and there's like 5 houses and they're like, you know what, these 5 are real contenders, we're really seriously thinking about these, it could be any one of these, I'll run the comps on those and I'll send the information, we'll sit down, we'll talk about it. Once they have kind of that realistic view on it, but not just going to see them, I like them to have an idea of ones they're serious about. Once they kind of get a feel for the ones that they're serious about, that's when I'll step in and be like, you know what, let me get the comps on this, to make sure that we're gonna put a good solid offer in, and that you're, you know, we feel good about that it's gonna appraise now and all of that as well. But not when we're just going to start looking, especially. Now, if you're going to see one and they're like, I think this one's going to be the one, and they're already talking about an offer before you go see it, or you're going to see 1 or 2 and they're talking about offers at that point, sure, maybe run the comps and have them, you know, be able to have those ready. But if they're, you know, you're seeing tons of them and they have no idea and they're in those early stages of looking, I would not be running the comps on every single one of those in detail yet. At that point, let them get an idea of what they want, what they're looking for, and then sit down and crunch those numbers. But once they have an idea of where they're going with it, that's kind of where I step in and do those numbers and figure all that out. And then I will go even into a little bit more detail, like I said, with my little cheat sheets, and kind of do those fine little adjustments, kitchens and fireplaces, and what are they looking for specifically, and make those fine adjustments for them as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Anybody
have, oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I have a question about a situation that I faced last week. So I was working with a buyer, and he found this absolutely gorgeous home, completely renovated from top to bottom. I mean, everything was brand new, but it was obviously the only home in that entire like subdivision that had been renovated. And so when we went in, the initial listing price was like $470, but the closest comp that I could find was $440 within a 1 mile radius. It wasn't as nice, obviously, but I mean, that was just a huge difference. And, you know, it got to a point where she was like, no, like, I need you to see that, like, the comps I was getting was, you know, reasonable. Like, I looked at a house, there was a house that was like 460, 470. And I was like, but where was it? She's like, oh, it's like 2-3 miles out. And it just didn't make sense to me because it was basically a completely different part of town to use that comp, but really that's the house closest to the style of the home that we were trying to compare. So how would you take it? Would you go that far out just to find a home that's similar? Or would you really just kind of say, listen, this home is priced $30,000 above the highest home in this subdivision?
So that's kind of where when I say like I run those fine details, if there's no other homes like it, that's kind of what I get into. So I'm a big pen and paper person. So I write things down a lot.
Okay.
So I'm going to show you, this is something that let me stop sharing my screen so I can show you, and I'll maybe show up a little bit bigger. So this is something that can you guys see this or no? It might be blurred out a little bit by let me see. My video does some weird things. I think I have my video blur thing on. Okay. So this is something that I do, and it's like a printout that I write out, and I write like different houses down and what they have and what they don't have and the value adjustments for them. So I'll either plus or minus like $3,000, $10,000 for a square footage adjustment, $11,000 for a pool adjustment. So I do really fine adjustments. If it's a rare thing like that, that's kind of where you're going to find that, like that house that was 440 that you said that was within the 1 mile, you could probably get there with that house if you go in and you make all those fine tune adjustments based off of what the house you're comping has. Easier way to get there is probably using that other house that's that far away. But if you need like to really, if you're really trying to justify it for your client and you're like, hey, look, here's what you have in this house. Here's the numbers. Here's the value in it. You can get there off of using that house. You just have to do those number adjustments and really break it down and figure all that out. It can be done. Like I said, I'm a pen and paper person. I will just go write it down and do all those fine-tune little nitpicky adjustments on it. This house doesn't have this X amount off the value. This house has this. $10,000 on the value of this house, and I can get there. So hopefully that kind of helps. Does that make sense? Kind of where I'm going with that.
Yeah, it does. It's just,
okay.
The listing agent obviously had different thoughts, and she was kind of taking the fact that I'm new as kind of like, oh, well, you don't know how to run comps. And I'm like, I know that you're running comps in a completely different area. So
yeah, and everybody has like a different way of kind of doing things. Like I said, I like to stay kind of certain parameters. You cross certain streets. Like I said, that's definitely how it is in Tucson. You cross different streets, you're in a whole new neighborhood. You're in a whole new type of neighborhood. I try and stay as close as possible, and I will make those houses. I will run those fine adjustments on those houses to see if those numbers make sense for that neighborhood and try and get there my way. Just because I need to know that for myself as well. So that's kind of where I'm at with it, but I'm sorry that happened with that other agent and them, talking to you like that. I have an agent friend in Virginia, and she had somebody tell her, she's a brand new agent, had somebody tell her, do you want me to tell you what to write on the offer? I know you're a new agent. So I know it's horrible when they say things like that, and it's frustrating. So
yeah, I mean, we ended up going with my price point, so I ended up winning in the end, but
Alyssa, I have a question.
Yes.
It's Adolfo. Do you run the comps from the monsoon tab? Because there's a section where it says comparables, or will you not recommend that?
So I use the Tucson MLS. So I do mine a little bit different than the monsoon tab. I know that's your guys's. Ours is called CRS. That's your tax tab, right? Your tax information tab. So I know I'm gonna, in another few weeks, I'm going to be doing another comp class. And what I was kind of thinking about doing is I will take a look at that, and maybe at the next comp class, I can do some time on like the Phoenix MLS stuff. I'll brush up on it. I haven't played with that one for a while, so I will brush up and I'll take a look at that, and then I can play around with it and see how that works, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just curious. Thanks.
Awesome. Yeah, of course.
Hi, Alyssa. This is Jamie. Nice to meet you, and thank you for sending me those Tucson listings. I appreciate that.
Of course.
I had to pop out for just a little bit, so if you said this and I missed it, I apologize. But are you able to share with us the cheat sheet that you have and your kind of little formula page?
Sure, Melissa, would that be okay? Is that all right? Okay. Yeah, I have no problem doing that. I have a few different little cheat sheets that I use, and I have no problem scanning them in and sending them over. Like I said, they're kind of old ones. I've had them for years. It just is kind of a reminder of information to look at. Don't take the numbers as, as gold on them by any means, but they're just kind of constant reminders for me to go off of, like, just information. But yeah, I have no problem sharing them. If you want them, just, yeah, I'd be more than happy to email them over to you for sure.
Okay, thank you so much.
Of course.
I have another question. When you were running the comps, so you were looking at obviously what's sold within the last, with more recent, with maybe 3 months, give or take, or were you going out further?
So I go out a little bit further.
I think she froze for a second.
I thought it was my computer.
We'll give it a few more seconds. Sorry, Alyssa, you're there, you're back.
Sorry, I was like, oh no. Yeah, so I will go out a little bit further if there's not a ton that's sold super recently. And then again, I account for the market, and if things have gone up or down, I just make sure to factor that into what's going on.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, because I've seen a lot of price reductions or just homes that are sitting on the market a lot longer. Because I see where you looked at the activity. Okay, this house has been there this long, and then they drop the price by this much. So obviously, you're going to use that as an indication that that's probably what could potentially happen with the listing or the home that you're potentially listing.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
Adjust for that, or kind of almost prevent from not sitting in the market longer than those other ones, maybe.
Yeah, and then definitely what I'm going to do, if I'm going into a list in that situation, I like to look at what's on the market, what's active, what's it priced at, have there been price drops, and then from there kind of going in and seeing, have they done a price drop? If so, did it sell? Did it go under contract right after that price drop? If not, how long has it been since that price drop active on the market? So I kind of look at that as well too, if I'm getting ready to list something, just kind of on the listing side of things.
Gotcha, makes sense. So are you also adjusting for like, what's your priority of preference? For example, you're looking at mainly square footage versus the year that it was built versus the subdivision versus it has 4 or 3 bedrooms versus it has a pool or not. What are you prioritizing to get the closest comps?
Sure. So my priorities, I like to stay plus or minus 200 is my ideal, plus or minus 200 square feet. Bedrooms, I like to stay, like, if it's a 3-bedroom, I don't look at like 2 bedrooms. I like to stay around 3 or 4, so minimum 3. And then again, if it's like air conditioned, I make sure like everything I'm looking at has AC. The age, I like to stay within like built a few years of that. Nothing over like 10 years, I would say, because then if I can't find the comps on it, because I mean, you'll find subdivisions. I have one, my neighborhood, and there's one literally across the street that was built last year. So it's like, that doesn't really work for those comps, because those houses are built brand new. And then if I can find the comps where it's like, if it has a pool, then I'll use all the comps with pools as well, just so I don't have to make those huge adjustments, just keep myself from having to do that. But if I can't find them, then I will use the other ones and adjust for it accordingly.
So how much are you adding when it has a pool or adjusting when it has a pool or when it has upgrades or has been renovated?
So like I said, there's different amounts that people will use for it. Typically kitchen is like a $25,000 upgrade. Pool, depending on like pool, how it's done. In-ground pool, I would say some people use different numbers. I like to be safe and play it safe because appraisers do things differently. And I always like to think of it as like, okay, appraisers coming in and they can always lowball me. So I'm like, okay, 10,000 for a pool is what I'm going to adjust for. I never like to be like, oh, this pool's absolutely perfect, I'm going to do 20,000 and then like overdo it. Again, there are some cases where it's like a luxury pool. And those are specific cases, but I like to always play on the safe side. I'd rather have it come in, have the appraisal come in over rather than under. So, and be safe on those cases. So yeah, I just, like I said, I have kind of a cheat sheet that I go off of and account for the fact that that's a couple years old. But I like to not overdo those numbers to just kind of stay safe in my numbers and